Welcome back to Let's Talk Taxes, everybody, to DeMore Tax Service LLC.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. So today we're going to be doing a deep dive into a topic that can really make a difference for your clients, and that is the Earned Income Tax Credit.
Yeah, it's a really powerful tool.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, a lot of people miss out on it.
It's true. 1 in 5 eligible taxpayers miss out on this credit, which is really a shame because think about how many of DeMore's clients could be leaving money on the table.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we're here today. We want to make sure that you've got all the information you need to help your clients maximize those refunds.
Absolutely. And the great thing about the EITC is that it's refundable.
That's right.
So even if someone doesn't owe any taxes, they can still get money back.
Yeah, it's not just about reducing what you owe. It can actually put money in your pocket.
Right. And we're talking about significant amounts here, too. In 2025, someone with no kids could get up to $600. But for families, it really jumps up. A family with one child could receive around $4,000, 2 children about $6,600, and 3 or more children over $7,400.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Especially for families that might be struggling to make ends meet. That could make a huge difference in their lives.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that the EITC is designed to help working people.
Right.
You don't have to have zero income to qualify.
Yeah, that's a common misconception.
Yeah.
You think, oh, I have a job, so I don't qualify.
Exactly.
But that's not true.
It's all about having earned income within certain limits.
Gotcha.
So even someone with a part-time job or who drives for a ride-share service could still be eligible.
Yeah, and that includes income from all those side hustles and gig work that's becoming so popular these days.
Absolutely. Think about all those folks freelancing or selling crafts online.
Yeah.
Their hard work can actually qualify them for the EITC.
That's really good to know. Now, speaking of what counts, I imagine there are some types of income that don't fall under that earned income umbrella.
You got it. So, for example, if someone's living off of interest from their savings or dividends from stocks or rental income, that wouldn't count.
So even though they have to report that income, it doesn't qualify them for the EITC.
Exactly. Other examples would be things like pensions, annuities, Social Security benefits, unemployment benefits.
I see. So helping your clients understand those distinctions is really crucial.
Absolutely. You want to make sure they're claiming everything they deserve, but also that they're doing it accurately so they don't run into any problems with the IRS.
Right. Now, let's say someone meets all the requirements. What's the process for actually claiming the EITC?
Well, they would need to file their tax return using Form 1040.
Okay.
And if they have a qualifying child, they'll also need to fill out Schedule EIC.
So it's not something that just happens automatically. They have to actively claim it.
Exactly. And accuracy is super important. Even small mistakes can cause delays or even trigger an audit.
That makes sense. Speaking of common questions, I bet a lot of people wonder if they can get the EITC if they don't have children.
All the time. And the answer is yes. As long as they meet the other requirements, like having earned income within those limits, they can still claim the credit.
That's good news for individuals who might not realize they're eligible. Now, what about the timing of the refunds? When can people expect to see that EITC money?
Well, refunds with the EITC tend to be released a bit later than regular refunds, usually mid-February or even later.
Oh, why is that?
The IRS does some extra checks to prevent fraud, and that can take a little longer.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And I imagine things can get a little more complicated when children are involved, especially in situations like divorce or separation.
Absolutely. You're right. Those cases can be complex, especially when determining who gets to claim the child for the EITC.
So if a client is going through a divorce or separation, it's essential to get all the necessary custody documentation.
For sure. Having a clear picture of the custody arrangement is really vital.
Are there any other situations where claiming children might get a little tricky?
Yeah, you have to think about those situations where a child might split their time between different households.
Like with grandparents or other relatives?
Exactly. The IRS has specific guidelines about who can claim a child as a qualifying child for the EITC, even if they aren't the biological parent.
Okay, so it sounds like understanding these guidelines thoroughly is really crucial for DeMore Tax Service LLC.
Absolutely. It's all about making sure your clients are getting the most out of the EITC and that they're doing it correctly.
Now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the EITC in a broader context.
Sure.
We can get caught up in the technicalities, but it's important to remember the positive impact this credit can have on people's lives.
Absolutely. It goes beyond just getting a bigger refund check.
Right. It can provide much needed financial stability for families.
It helps them catch up on bills, put food on the table, or even start saving for the future.
And that can have ripple effects on other areas of their lives too, like their health and overall well-being.
Exactly. When people feel more financially secure, it reduces stress, and they can focus on those other important things.
It's amazing how something like a tax credit can make such a big difference.
It really is. And for DeMore Tax Service LLC being that bridge between the complexity of the tax code and the real needs of their clients is so important.
Now, I'm curious, are there any specific resources or tools that DeMore Tax Service LLC can utilize to help them identify potential EITC clients?
Absolutely. The IRS offers several publications and online resources just for tax professionals.
Okay.
And there are even EITC assistant tools that can help you estimate eligibility and potential credit amounts.
So even before tax season gets into full swing, you can start thinking about which clients might benefit.
Exactly. It pays to be proactive. And, one thing I've noticed is that sometimes people are hesitant to claim the EITC because they're afraid of making a mistake and getting audited.
Yeah, I can understand that fear.
It's understandable. But that's where the expertise of a tax professional really comes in.
Yeah.
By carefully reviewing documentation, staying up to date on all the latest guidelines, DeMore Tax Service LLC can help alleviate those fears and ensure accurate claims.
That peace of mind is so valuable for clients. Now, I think it's about time to wrap up this part of our deep dive into the EITC.
Okay.
But before we do that, I want to remind everyone that we'll be back soon with part 2, where we'll be discussing even more nuances of this important tax credit.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks again for joining us, DeMore Tax Service LLC.
It's been a pleasure.
And for all of our listeners, if you're interested in learning more about DeMore Tax Service LLC, be sure to visit their website at DeMoreTaxService.com.
They've got a wealth of information there.
We'll see you next time for another insightful episode of Let's Talk Taxes.
See you then.
So we were talking about how important it is for folks to, understand the EITC and how it can really help them.
Right.
And, I was thinking, for DeMore Tax Service LLC, when you're working with clients, are there any tools or resources out there that can help you kind of streamline the process of figuring out who might be eligible for the EITC?
Oh, absolutely. There are a ton of great resources available. The IRS actually offers a lot of publications and online resources that are geared specifically towards tax professionals.
Oh, it's fantastic.
And there are these really handy EITC assistant tools that can help you estimate eligibility and, even calculate potential credit amounts.
Oh, wow. So you can really start thinking about, who might benefit from this credit even before tax season hits full force.
Exactly. Being proactive can make a world of difference. And one thing I've noticed is that sometimes people can get a little intimidated by the EITC.
Oh, yeah.
They're afraid of making a mistake or, getting audited.
Right. It can seem really complicated.
It's understandable.
Yeah.
But that's where, the expertise of a tax professional like DeMore Tax Service LLC is so valuable.
Absolutely.
By carefully reviewing documentation and staying up to date on all the guidelines, you can really help alleviate those fears and ensure that your clients are filing accurate claims.
And that peace of mind, that's got to be priceless for those clients.
Oh, absolutely. Now, speaking of, those trickier situations, we talked about divorce and separation earlier.
Right.
What are some things that DeMore Tax Service LLC should keep in mind when they're dealing with those kinds of cases?
Well, it really comes down to determining who has the primary custody of the child.
Okay.
Because there are very specific IRS rules about which parent can claim the child for the EITC.
Right.
And it's not always a clear-cut situation.
So it sounds like if a client's going through a divorce or separation, it's really important to get all of that custody documentation.
Absolutely. You need to have a really clear understanding of that custody arrangement to make sure the EITC is claimed correctly.
Now, are there any other situations where claiming children for the EITC can get a little complicated?
Oh, yeah, for sure. You have to think about those situations where a child might split their time between different households,
Okay.
like spending time with grandparents or other relatives.
But it's not always just about the parents. Exactly.
Yeah.
The IRS has very specific guidelines about who can claim a child as a qualifying child for the EITC, even if they're not the biological parent.
So it sounds like having a deep understanding of those guidelines is really crucial.
Oh, absolutely. It is. And, another thing I always emphasize is the importance of clear communication with your clients.
Communication is key.
Always.
Right.
You want to explain those EITC rules in plain language so they can understand what's going on, answer any questions they might have, address any concerns.
Right. It's all about making them feel comfortable and confident throughout the whole process.
Exactly. And that's what sets DeMore Tax Service LLC apart, that commitment to personalized service and client education.
Now let's kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about the EITC in the bigger picture of financial well-being,
Okay.
because it's easy to get caught up in all the details and the
Oh,
rules,
right.
but we can't forget about the positive impact this credit can have on people's lives.
Absolutely. It's about so much more than just getting a bigger refund check.
Yeah. Right. It's about providing that financial stability that a lot of families really need.
Exactly. It helps them catch up on bills, put food on the table, maybe even start saving for the future.
And that financial stability, it can have a ripple effect on other areas of their lives as well.
Absolutely. When people feel more financially secure, it reduces stress and allows them to really focus on other important aspects of their lives.
Yeah. It's incredible how something like a tax credit can have such a profound impact.
It really is. And for DeMore Tax Service LLC, being able to bridge that gap between the complexities of the tax code and the real life needs of your clients, that's what makes such a big difference.
Absolutely. Now, before we move on, I'm curious, are there any other tools or resources that DeMore Tax Service LLC could be using to help them identify potential EITC clients?
Oh, definitely. The IRS has got you covered. They offer a bunch of publications and online resources that are specifically designed for tax
Oh,
professionals.
fantastic.
And then there are also those EITC assistant tools I mentioned earlier. Those can help you estimate eligibility and calculate those potential credit amounts.
So even before the tax season rush really kicks in, you could start thinking about which clients might qualify.
Exactly. It always pays to be prepared.
Yeah.
And something else I've noticed is that sometimes people get a little hesitant to claim the EITC because they're worried about making a mistake or, getting audited.
Right. That fear is understandable.
It is, but that's where a tax professional like DeMore Tax Service LLC can really step in and make a difference.
Absolutely.
By carefully reviewing documentation, staying on top of all the latest guidelines, you can help put those fears to rest and make sure everything's filed correctly.
And that kind of peace of mind, that's invaluable for clients.
It really is. Now I think it's about time to wrap up this part of our deep dive into the EITC.
Okay. Sounds good.
Ah,
But before we do, I want to remind everyone that we'll be back soon with the third and final part of this episode where we'll be discussing even more about this important credit.
I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks again for joining us, DeMore Tax Service LLC.
It's been my pleasure.
And for all of our listeners, if you're interested in learning more about DeMore Tax Service LLC and all the great work they do, be sure to check out their website at demoretaxservice.com.
You won't regret it.
We'll see you next time for another insightful episode of Let's Talk Taxes.
That sounds good.
All right, so as we wrap up this deep dive into the EITC,
Mm-hmm.
I really want to thank DeMore Tax Service LLC for taking the time to join us today.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
We've covered a lot of ground, everything from those eligibility requirements to the nuances of claiming children and, just the overall impact that this credit can have, not just on families, but on communities as a whole.
Yeah, and I think, the biggest takeaway for DeMore Tax Service LLC is, you guys really have the power to make a difference in your clients' lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And by staying informed, by, utilizing all those resources that are out there and providing that personalized guidance, you can really help your clients get every single dollar that they deserve.
And never underestimate the value of building those relationships with your clients.
Oh, absolutely. That clear communication, that empathy, and that commitment to client education, it goes a long way in, building that trust and confidence.
You got it. You're not just crunching numbers. You're empowering people. You're helping them achieve greater financial well-being.
And that's something to be proud of. So to all the dedicated professionals at DeMore Tax Service LLC, keep the amazing work that you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to our listeners, if you're looking for expert guidance on the EITC or really any other tax-related matter, be sure to visit DeMore Tax Service LLC's website at demoretaxservice.com.
They've got all the information you need.
All right, so that wraps up our deep dive into the Earned Income Tax Credit. Thanks for tuning in to Let's Talk Taxes, and we'll catch you next time for another deep dive into the world of taxes.
See you then.